The moment science lost neutrality. For a long time, science believed it could stand apart from the world it studied, quietly watching reality unfold without leaving fingerprints behind, confident that observation alone carried no weight beyond understanding. That belief did not collapse all at once, nor did it arrive with scandal or catastrophe, but with a gradual realization that the act of knowing was no longer separate from the act of changing what was known. To understand why this moment matters now, we have to return to a foundational promise that shaped modern science, the promise of neutrality, the idea that facts could be extracted cleanly from the world, independent of values, intentions, or consequences. Scientists measured, nature responded, knowledge accumulated, responsibility ended at accuracy. For centuries, this separation held well enough to feel absolute. A telescope did not alter the stars. A microscope did not change the cell. Experiments revealed truths, but the world itself remained largely untouched by the act of revelation. But as scientific tools grew more precise, more powerful, and more deeply embedded in the systems they studied, that boundary began to erode. Measurement stopped being passive. Observation stopped being invisible. The presence of inquiry itself started influencing outcomes in subtle, compounding ways. This shift was not immediately obvious. Early signs were easy to dismiss. Slight behavioral changes, unexpected feedback, systems responding differently after being studied. Each anomaly had an explanation. Each explanation preserved the illusion of neutrality. Then patterns emerged. Systems altered their behavior once they were measured repeatedly. Models influenced decisions simply by existing. Predictions changed outcomes before actions were taken. The act of studying reality began feeding back into reality itself, reshaping incentives, pathways, and expectations. This was the first reveal. Science was no longer just describing the world. It was participating in it. The moment neutrality began to dissolve was not marked by a single experiment or discovery, but by accumulation. Too many cases where observation changed behavior. Too many domains where measurement influenced results. Too many systems where knowledge itself became a force. And once that realization surfaced, it became impossible to ignore. Because if science is not neutral, then every question carries consequence, every model carries influence, and every act of understanding quietly reshapes the future it claims only to observe. The moment science lost neutrality was not a failure of rigor. It was a cost of power, and the implications of that cost were only just beginning to unfold. As this realization spread, scientists began to recognize that neutrality had not vanished suddenly, but had been slowly eroded by success, by the growing ability to measure, predict, and intervene with such precision that the act of inquiry itself became inseparable from the system being studied. What once felt like distant observation now functioned as pressure. Systems adjusted themselves around measurement, adapting not because they were conscious, but because feedback reshaped their internal dynamics the moment attention was applied. Reality did not resist observation. It incorporated it. This marked a deeper reveal. Knowledge had become an active ingredient. When scientists measured ecosystems, species adapted to monitoring. When economists published models, markets moved to anticipate them. When social systems were analyzed, behavior shifted in response to being categorized, scored, and predicted. The observer was no longer external. Observation became a signal. The implications were unsettling because they crossed disciplines effortlessly. In physics, measurement altered outcomes. In biology, observation changed behavior. In technology, analysis reshaped usage. Everywhere, the same pattern appeared. Systems responded to being known. This created a subtle but powerful feedback loop. The more a system was studied, the more it adapted. The more it adapted, the less original its behavior became. Over time, systems stopped revealing what they were and began expressing what they were expected to be. Neutrality did not fail because scientists abandoned objectivity. It failed because objectivity gained influence. Once knowledge guided action at scale, facts stopped being inert. They reorganized incentives, redirected attention, and shaped environments before anyone consciously intervened. Data did not sit quietly in journals. It flowed into policy, automation, and decision-making systems that acted faster than reflection. The conflict emerged when scientists realized they could no longer separate truth from impact. A correct measurement could still cause harm. An accurate model could still distort outcomes. Precision no longer guaranteed innocence. This forced an uncomfortable reckoning. If every act of knowing leaves a footprint, then science cannot claim moral distance from its consequences. Discovery becomes participation. Explanation becomes intervention. And neutrality, once assumed, becomes something that must be actively designed rather than passively expected. The moment science lost neutrality was not a collapse of ethics. It was the moment ethics became unavoidable. The conflict reached its emotional peak when scientists confronted what this meant for responsibility itself. Because once neutrality disappeared, the comforting idea that consequences belonged only to application, not discovery, could no longer survive. Every question now carried weight before it was even asked. Every experiment reshaped the system it touched, not violently, but cumulatively, through incentives, expectations, and adaptation. The world did not wait for conclusions. It adjusted during the process of inquiry. This shattered a long-standing refuge of science. For generations, responsibility was delayed. First understand, then decide what to do. Knowledge came first. Ethics followed later. But once observation itself began altering outcomes, that sequence collapsed. There was no clean moment where understanding ended and influence began. The tension intensified as scientists saw the pattern repeat across increasingly sensitive systems. Learning algorithms adjusted behavior the moment they were evaluated. Social platforms reshaped discourse the instant metrics were introduced. Biological systems evolved around monitoring itself. Each layer of analysis became part of the system's environment. This revealed a painful truth. Neutrality was never a permanent state. It was a luxury afforded by limited power. When scientific tools were weak, their influence was negligible. When measurement was crude, its footprint was small. But as precision increased, so did consequence. Power transformed observation into intervention, whether intended or not. The emotional weight of this realization was heavy because it offered no simple escape. Refusing to study a system was itself a decision with consequences. Ignorance was not neutral either. Choosing not to observe shaped outcomes just as surely as observation did. This left science facing a paradox. To understand less was irresponsible. To understand more was transformative. There was no position outside the system anymore. No vantage point untouched by influence. Scientists were no longer documenting reality from the sidelines. They were embedded within it, altering trajectories simply by paying attention. The moment science lost neutrality was not about corruption or failure. It was about entanglement. Knowledge and consequence had fused. And once fused, they could never be cleanly separated again. The climax arrived with a realization that could no longer be softened or postponed. Science had not crossed a moral line by accident. It had crossed a structural one. The moment neutrality vanished was a moment understanding became inseparable from consequence. Not because scientists chose to intervene, but because the scale, speed, and reach of modern knowledge made influence unavoidable. Observation no longer sat at the edge of reality. It moved inside it. This reframed the entire meaning of responsibility. Science was no longer a mirror held up to the world. It was a lever embedded within it. Every measurement altered incentives. Every classification redirected behavior. Every model privileged certain futures, while quietly suppressing others. Even restraint carried influence, because what was not studied shaped what remained invisible. The resolution was not guilt, but maturity. The loss of neutrality did not mean science had failed. It meant it had grown powerful enough that innocence was no longer possible. With that power came a new obligation, not to retreat from discovery, but to acknowledge that discovery is never neutral terrain. This matters now because science increasingly operates at the level of systems that remember, adapt, and respond. Societies react to data. Algorithms adjust to metrics. Ecosystems reorganize around monitoring. In such a world, pretending that facts are harmless is itself a dangerous fiction. The future of science is not about reclaiming neutrality. It is about practicing responsibility in a reality where knowledge changes what it touches. The moment science lost neutrality was not the end of objectivity. It was the beginning of accountability. Because once understanding becomes influence, the most important question is no longer what we can know, It is how carefully we choose to know it. He